Hi friends, in my last video I disclosed that I have struggled with diabetes, and I want to do this video not to put attention on me, but to put attention on what is happening out there to the American people, because diabetes is a serious condition and it is on the rise in the American people today. And it could be you, because 1 out of 3 Americans have pre-diabetes, and they are not even aware that they even have it. So it could be you. So let's talk about diabetes, but not only that, what most people don't talk about, and that is pre-diabetic state. Now, in my last video, I start to disclose that I struggled with blood sugar issues again. Now, back in 1993 is when I was originally diagnosed with diabetes. Now, back then, you were either not diabetic or diabetic. There wasn't an in-between category of a pre-diabetic state. But I was averaging 300, so I definitely was diabetic. And I reversed it by learning about lifestyle changes. I exercised more. I watched the quantities of food that I put together, and I took sugar out of my diet and do not touch sugar today. Another thing you want to be careful is definitely alcohol. Now, some people say, I got to have a little bit of alcohol, but you learn how to put, not put food or certain drinks and everything together by learning more about a glycemic index. And that's what I learned to do. What foods I could put together, what foods or drinks, you don't want to do because they'll have a higher sugar content. And so definitely highly recommend learning about the glycemic index. And so I learned to do that, and I reversed my diabetes and stayed diet controlled for 25 years. So one of the things that I want to share, and I don't want to put the tension on me, I want to put the tension out there of what is happening to the American people out in our country today. Because I'm going to look at notes because I don't want to mess this up. But basically, there is over 1.5 million new cases of American people being diagnosed with diabetes every year. And like I mentioned, according to the Centers of Diseases and Control and Prevention, as I mentioned, as of 2018, more than 84 million people have diabetes, with type 2 diabetes, and 1 out of 3 are pre-diabetic and don't even know about it. So we're going to discuss a little bit more of the statistics and also a little bit more about type 2 diabetes, because it is the 7th leading disease of cause of death in America today. Now, what usually happens is it starts to destroy other parts of your organs, of your body, which leads to that death. Type 2 diabetes, or even type 1, but Type 1, they usually learn, it's autoimmune, and they learn about that when they're a child. So they're diagnosed very young in age, and basically their pancreas doesn't work at all. Okay, so it's autoimmune. Now type 2 is that sneaker one, because that's the one that people can have it, and why it's so dangerous, and they don't even realize that they have it, and they're running with these high levels, and you know, and just, well, maybe it's age, maybe it's this, you know, because you could be up and down, I feel good, I don't feel good, and you know, and it just ping pongs around, and so people don't usually make a connection. And so by the time they discover it, and it's in the full-blown diabetic state, there's been so much damage that's been done to the body somewhere, heart, kidneys, affects the eyes, the blood vessels in the eyes, your blood vessels in your body. Kidneys, I don't know if I mentioned, kidneys is the big one too. You know, damage has been done, and when it hits those areas, it's not always reversible. Okay, so that's why I want to do this awareness about it. And you know, and it's a good idea to have yourself checked for this very frequently, and especially as you get to the age, you know, into, you know, your 40s, start be mindful of it. But as you get older, our bodies change. They stop producing certain hormones, as I mentioned, you know, and for women, and also, but for men too, you know, they start to lose some important hormones too. And the change, our body, our metabolism starts to slow down, and all these things start to affect how our bodies digest and process, and changes, especially as we get older, and the closer we get to 60 and then on beyond, you know, is a critical time frame of the American people coming down with the pre-diabetes and later into a diabetic state. So if you fall in that category, be mindful of it, but don't put yourself in that number of category, because I was diagnosed in 93, as I mentioned, and I ended up being, I just turned 32, okay? So it's just a couple of months when I finally got diagnosed was after I had turned 32. And I had been struggling. It took them a year and a half to diagnose me, because I didn't fall in the statistics. I didn't fall in the age group. I didn't fall in that category that they were looking for. And so the primary doctor at that time kept blowing me off and blowing me off, but I was sick. I was tired. I didn't feel good. I had 6 colds in 1 year. You know, my immune system was really compromised, and they thought it was allergies, but I'd get this sinusitis and bronchitis. I'd be sick a month, barely well, then sick another month, and then, you know, and I kept running in and not getting better. I'd go to work and I'd be so exhausted and tired, and I'd, you know, half the time go sit in the bathroom stall, just, you know, I'd be so tired. And trying to get through a work day, and I'm still running to the doctor, mind you. Help me, help me. This is the doctor sometimes in this world today. And I had blurred vision, and I didn't realize the cotton mouth, and you're thirsty, and, you know, and he's just blowing it off, and sooner or later, he did a 6-hour glucose test, and I really don't know to this day what those readings were, but he ended up, you know, saying I was fine, you know, and treating me at that point then as a hypochondriac. And now I'm thinking, well, maybe I am, you know, but I knew my dad had diabetes, you know, in his process and where he went through with his life. And so, you know, I get married at this time and with my ex-husband, and we were happy. This was one of the happiest times of my life. I got married. I adored this man. We were just having a wonderful time. And then by my 1-year anniversary, well, I was sick on our honeymoon, and then by the 1-year anniversary, we go down to Palm Springs, and I'm just thinking, you know, they serve us for our anniversary this chocolate, you know, kind of brownie thing. And I'm thinking, well, maybe this is all in my head, you know. So we start to eat, you know, half of it. Or I eat half of it, he eats the other half of it. And we leave the restaurant, you know, and we start to go back to the hotel because, again, we're in Palm Springs, we're celebrating our anniversary. And so I start to feel really horrible. And I said, you know, Rick, I'm not feeling very good. And I got extremely cold. And so he got me back to the hotel, and I just said, I mean, I really did not feel good. I laid down on the bed. I said, I'm so cold. I can't get warm. It was a chill so deep to the bone. And it was like I couldn't stay awake. And he bundled all these blankets on me. Really, I should have went to the emergency room at that time. So it was almost like I just remember just that coldness, and he bundled me up with blankets, and all the blankets and everything he piled up and the comforter, everything wasn't warming me up. And it's kind of like I pass out, and I wake up the next morning and I realize, whoa, what just happened to me? So when I brought that up to my dad said, you know, well, I have an extra machine. Why don't you start checking your blood? So I started checking my blood. And then I started, you know, thinking, well, maybe I was hypoglycemic, where your blood sugar is lower, not higher. And so, you know, that's where my mind went. I didn't even think diabetic. And so, but I knew I was starting to realize I had blood sugar issues, and I started to take sugar out of my diet at that point. But I started to eat these meals, and I started to check my blood. And within 20, 30 minutes after I eat, I couldn't stay awake. And Rick ate the same thing I ate, you know. And I started thinking, well, let me check your blood, you know. And his was fine, you know, like, well, actually, and now to today, I would think he's starting to get a little high too. He was like within 150, but that was still like 30 minutes after eating. I really think he was kind of pre-diabetic, but mine was rising to already 198. I was almost getting to 200 right about within 20, 30 minutes after eating, and your blood sugar will continue to rise for anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours after you eat. But by that point, I was so tired, I couldn't even stay awake to check my blood beyond that point. So I end up changing doctors by a tip from a friend who said, why don't you see my doctor? He's an internal medicine specialist, because I had a primary doctor. I'm sorry, they're just not educated like some of these specialists. So I said, okay, let me go to this new doctor. And I get my transfer and I get it put in. And this guy was so thorough. He did a 95 questionnaire. He looked thoroughly at your family history, because that has a lot to do with what's going to happen to your body. So it's really important to know your family history. So, you know, of course, my dad was type 2, and so, of course, that's on there, the list and everything going on. And then he says, well, I tell you what, he says, we're not going to do that 6-hour glucose. We're going to do an A1C on you, and it's going to check your hemoglobin content of count of basically, you know, when your blood sugars are high, your body builds up with this hemoglobin in your blood cells, and they check the measure of this in this A1C, and it'll tell me my average of where I have been for the past 3 months. So there's no way of deceiving or being deceived through this test. And I said, okay. So he does this test, and I get that phone call, and he says, Irene, you are diabetic. And at first I was in denial. I mean, at that second I was like, no, don't you mean I'm hypoglycemic? And he said, no. I said, you're diabetic. And this is what you're going to do. And you're going to go to the hospital. And he put me on an outpatient program where you go in and they, I already knew how to check my blood because my dad. And then they put you on a diet program and all the things that they do back then, through this pamphlet that you get. And they put you on a calorie intake and what foods to eat and, and all that kind of stuff that they do back then. And so they get me rolling on trying to get my life and feeling better. And I wanted to do it without medication. And I went through all the shakes and I went through all the, oh my gosh, it's almost like your body's going through a withdrawal, but I went through it hardcore. I said, I don't want to be on medication. I'm going to do this and I'm going to get it down. And I was just stubborn and I worked on it. And of course, they checked my blood constantly. And then like I forgot how often, like a couple of weeks or a month, and then another month, and then eventually go to 3 months, and then eventually 6 months, and then once a year. So eventually got myself there. Okay. So the reason I share this story is because they checked me out through that doctor through a 6-hour glucose test, and I was struggling horribly at that time. And why that didn't get diagnosed then, to this day, I don't know. Or maybe it was just the doctor was a quack. But it was this other one through an A1C, if you ever are in doubt. And that doctor, or doctor doesn't, do an A1C, I would say, let's do an A1C on me. Learn about that. If you have a friend that has a diabetes, or a family member, and you're suspicious, start checking your blood. Just with a fresh needle. You could check it with their machine, obviously, and start to see your numbers. Now, I was systematic every time I was at 80, which everybody would say, well, hey, you're normal. That's 80 is good. But because I was averaging 300 is why 80 became my low with symptoms, when on a normal person 80 would be a good number. You should be feeling fine at 80. But I had all these low blood sugar symptoms at 80 because I didn't know that I had been averaging 300. Okay, so I share this not to put attention on me, but my journey because of being misdiagnosed for so long. But finally, I did get diagnosed. And so I want to, again, put this awareness out there, because as you get older, just get yourself started to get screened for it. It's just so important, because type 2, if you become that, could be secretly there and you don't even know you have it. And the more you know it and the earlier you can get that diagnosed, you can reverse it, do lifestyle changes, and not have damage be done to your body as soon as possible. Now, what type 2 diabetes is the body either doesn't produce insulin or it's insulin resistant. Okay? Now, most people are become more or less insulin resistant, but the bottom line is that your body ends up having too much sugar in the system sometimes, or the pancreas works, but it doesn't work to the full potential to produce enough insulin to compensate for the amount of sugar that our body is, or from the food that we eat that's turned to the glucose in our bloodstream. So it doesn't have enough insulin, or we call the keys. It's kind of like a key that unlocks the door that pushes the glucose into your, muscle tissue as well, that we need for energy and for your body to thrive. So it doesn't have enough keys basically to unlock the door to either, to push that blood sugar in usually is more of the primary reason of what happens. So we ended up having too much of the sugar in our bloodstream, which causes all of this damage that's going on throughout our body. Now, type 1 diabetes, obviously, they don't have, their body doesn't produce the insulin at all. And so that's why they have to do it, you know, with insulin, put it into their body to process the foods, because it's all turns to sugar, just stays in their bloodstream. There's no insulin there at all, and you'll die, obviously. And so it's a very important part of our digestive system and processing our foods that we eat to turn to the glucose, because we need that. We do need that. But for type 2, it's just we become a little bit more insulin resistant. So it's very important to be mindful. That's why your quantities of food and what you're eating and the glycemic index, so that we can help the insulin, because it works. It just doesn't work to the potential. It's like a broken thermostat, in other words, is the best way to explain. And so, like I said, it just doesn't produce, you know, enough insulin to compensate for the amounts of types of food or quantities of food that we're eating to digest as everything turns to this glucose in our bloodstream, to give us that energy, or to get it into the insulin members, the key that unlocks the door, that puts it into the body's tissue in order to give us the energy that we need. Okay, so you got to think of food is really fuel. It's fuel for our body. It's fuel for our brain, our organs. If it's done right and done in the right kinds of food and the proportions of food, then everything works like it's supposed to. It's kind of like a very complicated machine, basically, you know. And so it's really important to learn more about this as you get older, okay, when our bodies start to change and fail on us. Now, the symptoms can basically be increase in thirst, frequent urination, hunger, fatigue, and blurred vision. And in some cases, remember, as I mentioned, there's no symptoms at all. For me, it was tired. I was extremely tired because I wasn't getting the glucose that I needed to get into my body to give me the energy, because it was all staying in the bloodstream. So it was just making me fatigued, making me tired. And those are one of my first symptoms still to this day, is that, whoa, I got to go take a nap. I can't stay awake for nothing, and it'll be soon after I eat, and you're like, whoa, I don't feel good. When really after I eat, I should be feeling better, because, whoa, I ate. I got all this energy, you know. But again, if I don't have the right balance, then it teeters and it goes to the other direction. Okay. So this is just what I want to, you know, just get the message out there. There's all kinds of statistics out there that you could pull up if you want to do, you know, just statistics of the American people. But the most important one that I actually pulled out was, I could go over these other ones, but I thought, well, no, why do that? Really, the most important thing, remember, is that as of 2018, more than, again, 84 million Americans have diabetes, have type 2, and remember, 1 out of 3 have pre-diabetes. Okay, so get yourself checked out. Let it be one of your routine checks. If your doctor doesn't do it, have them do it. Or they do a fasting, which my fasting now has been, the last one was 105 when I went to the doctor a year ago. I still wake up now from my sleep up, I'm 110. So that kind of, I've been teetering from 1 to 110 when I wake up. So I just eat that protein in the morning, and once I start moving around, because exercise lowers the blood sugar, then I can start to eat a better meal by my lunch, and because then I'm going to be still moving around more, and I'll be able to use the foods that are turning to glucose. My body will use that for the energy, process it, and then my blood sugars are not going high during the day. So that's the good news. I'm just still waking up with these high numbers of, the 110, and haven't had too many of the 125, 120s. So that's good news, but I'm still kind of teetering up there when I'm still waking up. So I don't want to eat a full-blown meal at that point, because, woo, that's going to put me up above 150. So, and one last thing is, remember that the American endocrinologists, I always forget what they're called, the kind of association, their number is never above 150. ADA says never above 180 2 hours after you eat. Now my blood sugars are so sensitive, I rise very quickly and get to my highest by about an hour and a half after I eat. So remember, they come up with these numbers, science, but really you got to listen to your body. What symptoms does your body react to, okay? And for me, anything above 150, I don't feel good. And that's one thing that my first doctor discovered, and how I have very flexible blood sugars. So my target goal has always been 150. But the American Diabetes Association says anything above 180 is doing damage, where the American endocrinologists say 150. So they are not in agreement here, and hopefully something will happen in the future. I think they're working on lowering those standards, but I really think, again, it's an individual thing. Listen to your body. Your body has a way of speaking to you what is working for you, okay? So for me, if I get anywhere above 150, I got to go lay down. I don't feel good, or I start to get symptoms. So that's always been my target, okay? So I hope I can give that last tip or information to you all. And just, again, be aware of it, be mindful of it, and I wish everybody in the best of health as we age and get old, or old together. But you can reverse it. Remember that too, or lower your medication. Some people, no matter what, you're going to have to be on medication, and that's just the way it is. And that could happen to me the closer I get to 60, and I'm almost there. So I really am. I'm almost 60. And so there's a good chance that my body is going to start failing in all these areas, because we don't live forever. That is just the way life is. We're not going to live forever. And so I may end up having to go on some kind of insulin eventually, as my body loses more and more mobility. Because remember, exercise lowers that blood sugar, and that's what happens to us as we age and as we get older, and everything else changes with our body and causes this domino effect that, changes all these other factors into our body. That can affect the insulin and cause you to become more insulin resistant. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that, and I hope this was helpful to some people out there. And I love you all, and I'll see you in the next video. And I'll keep you posted what's going on too. Okay, see you then.